going to actively support the overthrow of Allende, but that we're going to passively support it. But there was a coup within the government like a month after that happened. So you could say we caused that, or our plans were made, they were nullified because there was a coup anyway.
Well, the CIA was there on the ground.
They're everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, did it come down to this, like, hey, either you do what we want, or else you're going to get killed?
Right.
Okay.
It's just there's no direct proof like with Ajax and with Guatemala that we did it, but we definitely fostered an environment where people on the ground, in the government, in the military, understood that the United States would support a coup if necessary.
By the way, the key word here, always to keep in mind during this Cold War era, is that Mossadegh was a commie, but he wasn't. That Arbenz was a commie, but he wasn't. He was really a reformer. They both were. Yeah, exactly. So, and then I don't think
What
anybody...
about the blowback?
Well, the blowback from Chile, what happened? The new government, the new leaders? Pinochet. And again, continued repression of labor unions, of human rights activists, and then they reformed their government, their economy, based on the Milton Friedman model, which gives the 1% even more.
That doesn't
money.
sound like blowback, though. That just sounds like that's the result that we were looking for as far as our government.
Yeah, but that's what it is. Blowback.
Yeah.
Okay. Afghanistan, I don't think we have to say much about that.
Well, I could just make a point. The definition of blowback, as the CIA understands it, is not necessarily that it will result in violence, but that when whatever occurs, the people of the United States won't know the context because they don't know about the action.
Right.
So blowback is not necessarily that there will be bombing in the United States.
I got it.
It's just it's meant to imply that we keep the event itself secret, so that if there is blowback, the American people won't understand the real place in their proper context. They won't be able to respond to prevent that sort of thing.
And 9/11 is the best example of that.
It's because they hate him.
Yeah.
Right, that's what George Bush said, because they hate freedom-loving
Because
people.
we had military bases and military personnel in Saudi Arabia near the holy sites. It's not because 500,000 Iraqi children died as a result of sanctions and unclean water because we bombed their waste treatment plants. And it's not because Israel treats the Palestinians so well.
Right.
You know these things. But the next one,
Afghanistan.
we have another quiz here. You're pretty good.
You didn't even do Afghanistan.
I'm a UMass Boston.
UMass Boston.
Yeah, but I'm from Oxford, Boston.
All right. So the next one gives us, just take that off, gives us hope. All right.
Yeah, Afghanistan.
Yeah, you didn't do Afghanistan.
Afghanistan's the most important.
Well, National Security Act. Ooh, that's a good one. 1947.
NSA.
Yeah, what was that?
What is that? Yeah, the National Security Act establishes the CIA, eventually changes the War Department into something called the Defense Department, okay? Which is really still the War Department.
Kinder, gentler machine gun.
Yeah. So, not many people...
It's also secret government.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And that's very important what you said about
Billions of dollars.
keeping these things secret. Yeah. Does anybody here know what the budget of the CIA is and the National Security Agency budget?
Does anybody?
I bet if you ask most Congress people, they don't even know because they're not even told.
Chalmers Johnson said that in 2007 he said that 40% of the defense budget was essentially secret in the sense that it was only known to about half a dozen high-ranking congressmen and the actual military itself. And that we have some oversight over that, but for the most part, his estimate was 40% of this big defense budget is unknowable for what we do.
So this is a democracy. This is an empire.
Yes,
and there's a project here that was on public television, and Ed Helm, who's the head of this, is speaking later in a media conference, I think, right? It's called Democracy or Empire. You can go to the website, all one word, democracyOrempire.org. And, and you mentioned Chalmers Johnson.
It's great.
If you haven't heard, how many people have read anything from Chalmers Johnson? Anybody?
I recommend Blowback or Sorrows of Empire, or Nemesis.
He's written a trilogy of books dealing with U.S. foreign policy where he mentions the number of overseas bases,
I think he cited like over 700.
700, and that doesn't count the black sites and the bases within the United States. That's only, I think he said 749 in 2009. Was what
Chalmers is a conservative historian.
he is.
Yeah,
Yes.
he died the last year, I believe.
Yeah, he
But
died last
if you haven't read those books, Blowback, Sorrows of Empire, and Nemesis, The Last Days of the American Republic, which we hope we're here to prevent from occurring as part of the 99%. Another book, I think, anything like Noam Chomsky.
Yes. Manufacturing
about
consent.
empire as well.
Deterring Democracy, Manufacturing Consent. And he has a great book about 9/11, little pamphlet.
As well.
And it's Rogue State by
Oh,
William Blum.
William
Real
Blum.
simple and just.
Killing Hope, what's another one? Killing Hope by William Blum. And he just gives you a whole accounting of all these interventions and what the CIA, the CIA in our name has assassinated. How many, Richard?
There's no way of knowing.
There's no way of knowing, but leaders or attempted assassinations. Or you support people who assassinate other people that we don't like. I mean, it's a sorry, dismal, immoral record of we claim that we stand for human rights.
Is the CIA, are they using drones too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
They shouldn't be. What happened was when that person suicide bombed and killed the two CIA agents, that was kind of a problem because the CIA was not supposed to be doing drone targeting at that time. They had gone to Congress and not under oath, but they had said, we're not doing drone targeting. And then it turned out, well, actually, we're picking the targets and we're helping with the actual shooting of it. And then nothing happened from that. It's just, okay, still do it. Keep going. Problem solved.
You got a guy down here. Oh, NATO, by the way, was formed in 1949. Now, ostensibly, the purpose was to protect Western Europe from the communists, right? The Soviets. When did the Soviets form their organization that was similar to NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which I think is a criminal syndicate right now, a war maker? The Warsaw Pact, 1953. So they're responding to NATO, our creation. Now, George Kennan, ever heard containment policy? George Kennan, Undersecretary of State. He said something a couple years after World War II. He said, we have about 50% of the world's wealth, but only 6.3% of its population. That's changed. In this situation, we cannot fail to be the object of envy and resentment. Our real task in the coming period is to devise a pattern of relationships which will permit us to maintain this position of disparity without positive detriment to our national security. To do so, we will have to dispense with all sentimentality and daydreaming, and our attention will have to be concentrated everywhere on our immediate national objectives. We need not deceive ourselves that we can afford today the luxury of altruism and world benefaction. The day is not far off, Kennan concluded, when we are going to have to deal in straight power concepts. Now, he set our foreign policy in stone, because it was accepted, and then we get the last comment here from, quoting again from Kennan. I mean, he was a remarkable man. He actually repudiated much of what he had written at a later time. So here he is. George Kennan says this. I already mentioned, to maintain this position of disparity, U.S. economic military supremacy, we will have to dispense with all sentimentality and daydream. We should cease to talk about vague and unreal objectives such as human rights. Hello. Okay? And the raising of the living standard and democratization. The day is not far off when we are going to have to deal in straight power concepts. The less we are then hampered by idealistic slogans, the better. Now, what does that say about the direction this country was heading post-World War II?
Just about the way we
We're going to harden our hearts to keep what we got.
Right. Might makes right. And, the cowboy diplomacy wasn't started by George Bush, but it was continued by George Bush.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Animal bomb.
Yeah. So we got the Cold War, and we know the Cold War supposedly ended in 1989. And then we had to launch on to a new enemy to justify all the spending on the military and these bases overseas. And you know what that was. Terror. The terrorists, they're everywhere. They're here. They're everywhere. They're even in Hooksett. They're even in Keene.
Yeah.
They're everywhere. All right, so the next one. Now, has anybody ever heard of the National Priorities Project? Anybody? If you look at the bottom, if you have a pen or pencil, they're based in Northampton, Massachusetts, www.nationalpriorities.org. They offer wonderful analysis of spending by our government, which benefits the 1% primarily. And in this case, you can go Google or go to that website. For every state, for every city, for every town, they will tell you how much money the taxpayers of those sites, those cities, the locations are spending on various issues. In this case, the people who live in this city, Manchester, New Hampshire, are paying the proposed 2012 budget, defense budget, or offensive budget, $136.8 million for this coming year, their share. For that amount of money, we could hire 2,169 elementary school teachers. Or that same amount of money could hire, and this city has cut firefighters, and I suspect if you come from a different city, that's also happening as well as teachers. Okay, and then you've got, look at the veterans. And as veterans, we know full well the cost of war. You know, the recruiters never talk to young kids about losing a limb or losing their sight or losing their lives, coming back disfigured, coming back, and Richard doesn't mind to mention, with PTSD. I mean, I would say, Richard, we have
diabetes for that.
And diabetes. We have a public access show. I used to introduce Richard as saying, well, he served in Vietnam. He left Vietnam in 1969, but Vietnam never left him. And you've been going to counseling, right?
Dow Chemical made Agent R defoliant, which worked very well in Vietnam, at least as far as defoliating the trees. Didn't do anything to deter the enemy, I can guarantee you that. But 40 years later, now I'm diabetic, and a lot of consequences of that are not full of surprises, put it that way. And Dow Chemical paid out about $130 million 20 years ago to different veterans, not me, but other veterans. And the United States government paid Dow Chemical to make the chemical. And Dow Chemical pays me absolutely nothing, but you do as citizens pay taxes, and that money comes to me. Not much, not enough, of course.
Just within the last week, a veterans group came forward and said that the Pentagon has wrongfully discharged as many as 22,000 soldiers since 2001, with soldiers who have post-traumatic stress syndrome, and they characterize it as a personality disorder, personality dissociation, or something like that, so that they don't have to pay anything for them.
And they claim that personality problem existed before.
Hey, RJ.
Which of course is ridiculous, because they wouldn't have let him in the service in the first place.
RJ.
Well, okay, we wanted to, can we go back? Some people want to take some pictures of the other, but I wanted to mention
How you doing?
Some of the books, I think. Matt, you mentioned Thomas Johnson, and we mentioned Noam Chomsky. Oh, but before I get to that, we are, as veterans, we think we're patriotic because we're not afraid to criticize our government when we feel it's done wrong. And so that's why we decided to do this, and we came out here in support of the 99% of the Occupy movement. But something I wrote down in terms of our foreign policy, if you flip over the rock of America's foreign policy this past century, and some of you got the handout, I think, on our interventions, right? And our newspaper, we have a newspaper over here called the War Crimes Trials. And the headline here, one of them. Yeah.
This is U.S. withdrawal and defeat in Iraq. And anybody who